On today's show, Nolan Traore is beginning to look like the real deal during a breakout stretch as Brooklyn's starting point guard. Can he be the team's point guard of the future? I'll dive into that and more on today's episode of Locked On Nets.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to Locked On Nets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Now the number one sports podcast network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I'm your host, Erik Slater, Brooklyn Nets beat reporter for ClutchPoints.com. Thank you for making me your first listen of the day. The show is 100% free on all those great platforms. And on today's episode, we got Lucas Kaplan coming on the show to talk about Nolan Traore's breakout stretch. Can he be the team's point guard of the future? How does he fit alongside Yegor Dioman in the backcourt moving forward? We'll also get into some of the Nets' other rookies and their overall tank strategy as we approach the stretch run to close the regular season. Let's go. All right, we got Lucas Kaplan from Nets Daily back on the pod. And Lucas, we're off the heels of two Nets wins, one over the Wizards and one over the Bulls. And we've kind of had, I think overall, this, despite it being a tanking season, I think it's been a fairly entertaining season for the Nets, all things considered, with where they're at. And I feel like we've kind of had different segments of the season, especially in respects to the rookies. Like we kind of have had these stints where we're excited about individual guys that they're playing well, having these productive stretches. And we're in the Nolan Traore stretch right now because Nolan has come in the starting lineup over the last 6 games, played really well. Actually, the last 11 games that he's played in, he's been really effective. And he had his best game of the season probably last night, 13 assists in that win over the Bulls, also 13 points, only 3 turnovers, just a really effective game overall. And my takeaway, from these recent Nolan performances is that he has looked the part overall, and his poise and his confidence has done a complete 180 from where it was at earlier in the season. When you and I talked on this podcast about Nolan potentially being a guy who was going to need to spend a really extended stretch in the G League and whether he was going to be NBA ready at any point this season, he has looked like an effective player. He's looked like a player who has belonged, and he's bordered on very impactful during some of these recent performances, especially last night against the Bulls. So when you take a step back, when you look at what Nolan's done over this recent stretch, what has been your main takeaway from his recent performance?
He really just looks, and I hate sounding so cliche, he just looks way more comfortable. There was a play that I want to clip, and I'm writing about him right now, where it was early in the Bulls game. He's driving down the left side of the court, and instead of flying kind of as fast as he can, maybe for a layup, maybe to get to the baseline and throw like a hook pass, down the baseline to the opposite corner, he kind of pauses and then takes another dribble and gets to 2 feet and kicks it out to the top of the key. Like he really just, it's tough to say much other than he looks a lot more comfortable. I tweeted a stat, I think 2 weeks ago, that Nolan Traore was tied for the lowest 2-point percentage in the NBA. Since then, he's near 50%. It's a super small sample, but he just looks a lot more comfortable, and he can really diagram the floor out of pick and roll with that added comfort. He knows where the skip pass is going to be open. He knows that if there's 2 shooters on the weak side and that guy's zoning up, he can kind of manipulate it with his eyes and maybe throw it to the wing, maybe throw it to the corner. I don't know, is that so, I guess, base entry level to say he just looks more comfortable? I don't know how else to say it, really.
No, I think that is the main takeaway. I think he looks more comfortable and he looks more confident, and those things go hand in hand. But yeah, I think I would echo all of what you said, and just the fact that I think the pace is a big thing that we've spoken about. And, Jordi Fernandez, we talked to him about it last night, and he pointed to that. He said, earlier in the season, it was kind of Nolan going 100 miles an hour, going a little bit too fast at times. And now he is playing with that pace. And Jordi said he can go, fast to slow, slow to fast. And that's really the biggest thing that I had been looking for from Nolan offensively, outside of the 3-point shooting, which we can get into. But we all know that he's a walking paint touch. He's been able to get downhill, penetrate, create advantages really, since earlier this season at every game that he's played in. But the question has been, once he gets there, what's he going to do? And I think we're seeing him now get a little bit more comfortable when he gets down there and miss the trees. He does, he slows down. He takes that kind of sidestep dribble to let the shooters present themselves, to seed rolling big men. He'll Nash dribble around the baseline. He'll, snake the pick and roll and put guys in jail. He'll do all of that stuff that he wasn't doing earlier in the season. And the vision, I mean, you watched his tape at St. Quentin. I did also, but the game last night, I'm sure you got to watch it. He had some really high level reads in that game. Like, plays where he had one pass that I got a clip and post on Twitter. I posted all of his assists, but he had one where he was came off the pick and roll, went to the right side, got into like the middle of the floor, near the paint. And he saw like the low man rotating over and he was kind of getting doubled. And he like kind of contorted his body in the air and threw an over the head skip pass to the corner to, I think, Terrence Mann for a 3. And I was like, just seeing that pass and also having like the athleticism to get it off and put it right in the shooting pocket, that was really impressive. And he hit like 3 or 4 of those passes, yesterday, him driving and finding the skip pass to the corner for a wide open 3. I just think his height, his length, his speed, his vision, if you can kind of get all of that stuff working in unison, he's going to be a really effective playmaker. And that's what he has been during this recent stretch.
Yeah. So the thing is, he's just so slight and he's so thin. And I've, talked about like, he's so skinny and his shoulder, he's just so slight a frame, but he is 6'4", 6'3", 6'8" standing reach measured at the combine, clearly plus wingspan. And so I know the exact pass when you're talking about. I was surprised the Bulls a couple of times doubled him or showed him 2 defenders off the pick and roll. But even then, he could jump and with 2, like the pass you're saying, with 2 hands, throw it over his head because he can see over those defenders and he can get it over those defenders. And, I was on a pod with Chuck and Darts earlier, this great draft podcaster, Chuck and Darts earlier this season. And he said, this was when Nolan was really struggling. He was like, all right, like what is one NBA ready skill he has? Like, does he have any? And I said, if there is anything, it's the court mapping. It's the kind of understanding of the geometry of where in high pick and roll help comes from, what should be open depending on what coverage. And that Bulls game, like we really saw it, when a low man would help, he was looking at it and he knew that other corner would be open. When it was regular drop coverage with like a lift shooter on the single side, he knew to throw that lob. You really saw that court mapping kind of come into play, as well as his height and and his frame. And I tweeted all those clips of him making vertical contests at the rim, which he's been pretty consistent at, which I thought Capper and Ruocco did a really good job of pointing out on the broadcast.
Yeah, and Jordy spoke about that after the game about Nolan's defense. Also Noah Clowney, he was just like, Jordy was going on and on about the verticalities, as they call them during that game, and Nolan had those. But last thing on the Bulls game, the playmaking overall was really impressive. There was a really good stat from the All City podcast. I saw this on Twitter. It says the Nets got 1.68 points per direct on-ball pick set for Nolan Traore last night. That's the most efficient game a player has had this season where they've received at least 25 on-ball picks. So it was an elite performance from Nolan. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And you look over this recent stretch, over Nolan's last 11 appearances, he's at 11.3 points, 4.5 assists, 1.9 turnovers, 47, 41, 79 shooting split. So, it's not the biggest sample size, but 11 games, like it's something. And he's looked really effective. And I think overall, if we're just taking a step back and, you just said, Chuck and Darts asked, like, does Nolan have one NBA ready skill? And you can say the court mapping, but I think overall, if you look at him on both ends of the floor, for me, like he's obviously a walking paint touch. He's one of the fastest players in the league. He can get downhill at will. He does have that court mapping, that, pretty good vision and feel to make anticipatory reads against defensive coverages. And then defensively, as you alluded to, with the 6'4" frame, with the 6'8" wingspan, he's scrappy. He's obviously quick. He can add some size to that frame overall. So I think you're really hopeful for all of those attributes two-way. And then I think you look on the offensive end of the floor. For me, the question's really just like, where does he score from consistently? Like, is he going to be able to finish at the rim? Does the mid-range touch and the floater get a little bit better? Obviously, is he able to shoot from 3? We've seen the three-point shot a little bit. He's overall not been good there this year. The floater and the finishing has gotten much better as of late. But if those things can develop, there's just a lot of tools in the toolbox that leave me encouraged that, I don't know if he's going to be a starting point guard in the NBA long-term, but that he'll have a role in the NBA long-term.
I still have a lot of, long-term questions and concerns about the frame and the shooting off the dribble, but it is so encouraging that since I found that post, he was tied for last in the NBA in 2-point percentage with Rob Dillingham among all NBA players that had taken at least 50 2-pointers. Well, since then, that was 8 games ago. Over the last 8 games, he is 28 of 50 from 2. So that is 56%. That is, and the Bulls are a shorter team. They roster all these guards, but it is the dog days of the NBA season. These rookies are hitting a wall. We've kind of seen it with Yegor. That to me is the most vital, critical improvement he could make right now. Just to have a scoring floor based on shots that he can get to, whether they're floaters, layups, whatever. And the looks are still pretty hard. He was hitting some really tough off the high glass floaters against Chicago. But, I will take 28 for 50 over an 8-game span 100 times out of 100. That's a genuinely very encouraging run of play from Nolan for me.
And over these last 6 games, or 5 of these last 6 games, because Yegor didn't play in the last one, we've gotten something that a lot of Nets fans have been clamoring about, which was the Yegor Dillman, Nolan Traore backcourt, and getting to see those guys play alongside one another. And prior to that, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but they barely played with each other at all. It was really Yegor playing the point, or at least being the ball handler out there, and Nolan kind of running with the second unit. But they both gotten to play alongside one another, and it's looked good in spurts. So how do we feel about that duo? Could that duo be a viable backcourt of the future for this Nets team? We'll get into all that when we continue Locked On Nets after a quick break. Guys, finding a doctor you actually like can feel like discovering a diamond in the rough. Sure, you want someone who's in network, nearby, and has availability, but you also want a doctor who listens, makes you feel comfortable, and explains things clearly. That kind of doctor exists, and finding them is easy with ZocDoc. ZocDoc is a free app and website that helps you find and book high-quality in-network doctors so you can find someone you love without all the hassle. We're talking about booking in-network appointments with more than 150,000 providers across 50 states, covering over 200 specialties from primary care and dentistry to dermatology and eye care. Guys, I'll admit it, I've definitely put off doctor appointments longer than I should. Between work, life, and everything else, it's easy to delay. ZocDoc makes the process simple. You can search by specialty or symptoms and actually build a care team that works for you. You can see real-time availability and book instantly. No phone calls, no waiting on hold. Stop putting off those doctor's appointment and go to ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNBA to find and instantly book a doctor you love today. That's ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNBA, ZocDoc.com/LockedOnNBA. Thanks to ZocDoc for sponsoring this message. Guys, the new year is here, and it's the perfect time to reset your routine and refresh your space. If you're spending more time at home, you might as well love how it looks and feels. That's why you should turn to Wayfair. It's a one-stop shop for getting your home back on track. From bedding and mattresses to storage solutions for every room, Wayfair makes it easy to start the year fresh. Wayfair has everything you need for a full home refresh, all in one place. Whether you're updating your living room, organizing your space, or upgrading your work-from-home setup, Wayfair's huge selection makes it easy to find exactly what works for your style and budget. Guys, I picked up new bedding and accent pillows from Wayfair, and it completely changed how my bedroom feels. It's cleaner, calmer, and more put together. I love that I could find pieces that match my style without spending a fortune. Shopping is easy, delivery is smooth, and everything arrives exactly as expected. Get organized, refreshed, and back on track this new year for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. All right, coming back from the break on today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about Nolan Traore, some of the Nets' other rookies, and focusing in on this Nolan Traore, Yegor Dillman backcourt that we've seen in 5 of the last 6 games and seems like is going to be the Nets' starting backcourt for the rest of the season. When I analyze this, I think that there are some questions and concerns about those two guys being a starting backcourt moving forward. The jury's obviously, very much still out on all these Nets rookies. But I will say that the prospect of having Nolan Traore, 6'4", 6'8" wingspan, Yegor Dioman, 6'8", 6'10" wingspan, both of them very high field players. Yegor obviously is shooting the cover off the ball, but guys who really keep the ball moving and are able to make the right read, something that we've heard Sean Marks talk about, after the draft. The prospect of having those two guys alongside one another, I don't know if there's enough like off the dribble juice, enough, on ball scoring and all of that. But I think there are a lot of attributes that they could complement each other and just give you an overall feel in the backcourt that I think should excite Nets fans moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, Yegor is not, you can't rule him out in terms of playing with anybody. He's not a ball handler just yet. He's certainly not a primary ball handler. That doesn't mean that his nice extra passing and his, in a dynamic play and he'll look off the corner and hit the other corner or something like that. He has shown really high level extra passing flashes, but Yegor right now, we've talked about his usage. It's all off ball shooting. It's all catch and shoot three. The spreadsheets will tell you that he functions the same way as late career Klay Thompson or Buddy Hield. So if you're talking to me about a backcourt partner, it could really be anybody that does a lot of ball handling, and his feel and his passing is just a plus. It's this, very nice additive thing. Nolan, I mean, he has a long way to go. It's a couple of weeks before the All-Star break, but in terms of when you think about their highest level outcomes, potentially complementary skill sets, I don't see why not, other than they have to put on some weight and, maybe beef up and some rebounding and defense. But, why not? Yegor is really an off-ball offensive player with a little bit of extra feel right now, if that makes sense. So I don't know why that wouldn't fit next to Nolan at his best, in a vacuum.
Yeah, and I think that we saw Yegor, kind of playing the point like he is the point guard in the starting lineup, or was prior to Nolan coming in. But the Nets oftentimes did have some other guys in there handling, whether a Terrence Mann or a Tyrese Martin, whoever you want to say. And we've seen it, over these 5 of these last 6 games. But I'm really happy that they have, Nolan in there with Yegor. I think you wanted to get the look at Yegor at point guard. You wanted to get him some of those reps. But he really wasn't playing with a guy who, a point guard, a high-level ball handler who could collapse the defense and really get the ball into rotation and generate open looks. A lot of the time it was Yegor, and you had guys like Tyrese Martin or Terrence Mann handling the ball who were fine. But now with Nolan, the way that he was collapsing the defense, the way that he was penetrating and kicking or lobbing, against the Bulls, if you had Yegor out there, he's going to get some much, better looks overall. So just how do you feel about, the long-term outlook, or not the long-term, just the rest of this season, how Nolan will impact Yegor and what he's able to do out there?
I do think that Yegor will continue to thrive if he's getting spot-up looks. I think the Nets, this is a little bit of a different conversation, but I think they may be careful about I was kind of thinking about this today. What else does Yegor have to prove this season? What else does he have to do before he gets in the lab and works on his ball handling and works on his strength?
I was going to say,
what's there left for him?
Go make a layup that. That's
go dunk on.
That's probably one of the things that he has to prove. Any kind of 2-point scoring, whatsoever.
Hey, he is plantar fascia. Come on, man.
We've seen some flashes, but yeah, I think the 2-point scoring, I think that's the gripe that the fan base would have, obviously.
And it's a gripe I have, and I'm concerned about his physicality and what he can do in the paint and inside the arc. But do you think we're really gonna see? I shouldn't say that. I was gonna ask you if you really thought we'd see a lot of improvement before a summer of getting in the gym, whether that's the weight room or working on counters. But there was that play, I think it was right to open the game against Utah, where he kind of tries to decel and he goes off 1 foot and he airballs a floater because, it's not just a very strong take, but even before he gets in the gym, he can work on some, as Jordy talks about, 2-foot stop, extra dribble. And I've been saying this since the beginning of the year. I don't care if Yegor turns it over 5 times a game. If he shows me a little bit more of getting to 2 feet, a counter in the lane, an extra spin move, another jump stop, then it's well worth those extra turnovers. So I kind of answered my own question, but I'm like the shooting leap Yegor has. I'm almost ready to grade his season already. Like, I don't know what more he could show me in the last 25 games, you know?
Yeah, it kind of seems like you know what you're getting from Yegor, or at least like what the baseline skills are and what are kind of going to be like the go-to attributes of his skill sets. Now he's 19 years old. He's going to develop a lot more. We'll see with some added weight, what he can do. And if he can get some, if he can develop some off the dribble juice and he can get in the lane, play off 2 feet, do some more things off the ball, that's when that, Yegor Nolan pairing could really get exciting. But I want to talk quickly before we go to the last segment about some of the other Nets rookies, because I said we've kind of taken turns getting excited about all the different Nets rookies in spurts throughout this season. And I think that we saw some good performances in these last couple of games from Danny Wolf and Drake Powell. Danny had been struggling in a big way. He kind of had the perfect get-right game against the Wizards. Like, that was a game on the calendar. It's like, Danny, this is the one. Like, you're going to get some good looks in this one. You can get a little bit more comfortable. He followed it up with a really good performance against the Bulls, I thought. And then Drake, like, we finally got a Drake poster last night, which was nice to see. Like, one of the best Nets dunks we've seen in a long time. So both of those guys, I think, have had, encouraging performances as of late. And it's been a very up and down season for them. But what do you think about what we've seen from those guys in these last few games?
Yeah, I believe Danny when he sits at the podium and he says, yeah, I'm much more comfortable with the ball in my hands, and I have to learn how to get more comfortable when I'm playing a spot up role. Danny, I'm still pretty worried about, honestly. Like, the 2-point finishing has been better over the last 2 games. But, a week ago, I think I read you a stat where he was the worst 2-point finisher in the NBA among players 6'11" or taller. And then of like 200 players taking 5 threes per 100, he was like 180th in percentage. So he needs to be an efficient scorer from one of those areas. That being said, when he's good on the ball, it gives me hope, because I believe him that it's an adjustment to go from playing with the ball in your hands to being hey, spot up in the corner and attack closeouts. At least if he's thriving with the ball in his hands, it shows some potential to be this mismatch problem, be this creator from a variety of play types all over the court. I'm still pretty worried about like the finishing and the physicality and the athleticism in the long haul. He's 21. It's not like he's 19. And there's some plays where his lack of lift is pretty worrisome. But I don't want to just sit here and say, oh, he's a lost cause. Oh, I don't think he'll be good. Like, I'm worried, but he's showing some flashes, like you said, over the last 2 games. And it's always fun on defense when teams try to just isolate him on switches, and occasionally he gets beaten. Rob Dillingham got him a couple times against Chicago, but like he's more than capable of holding up. And if you're going to grind your whole offense to a halt just to attack Danny in isolation from the top of the key, it's like he'll be fine, and that's encouraging 100%.
Yeah, I think overall, I've liked some of what I've seen from Danny in these last couple of games. Also, Drake. I thought that, obviously we got the dunk. I think that he had some nice takes to the basket. The 3-point shot going to be a big barometer.
Just
for him.
Do more. Just do more. Just do more. Just go.
He has
try.
To, yeah, like he has
do
those,
stuff.
He has these games where you don't even notice that he's on the court, and then he'll have a play like obviously the dunk, but then he'll have another play where he like crosses over, kind of like Hezzy's goes downhill and finishes with like an up and under layup, and you're like, damn, that was smooth and that was like really nice. And just get the ball in his hands a little bit more and see him do some more stuff. So I think we both like to see that. And then I think for last rookie we got to touch on quickly is Ben Suraf, and Ben's just struggling in a big way right now. I'm honestly somewhat surprised that he's been up in the NBA this long, during this recent stretch, because he's struggling. Like he looks really uncomfortable out there. And I question, like, yes, it's great to get him NBA minutes. I think it helps the tank, indirectly. But I wonder at what point is it just bad for his confidence to have him out there just like really struggling like he is.
The thing that's disappointed me a little is that he has a legitimately advanced handle for his age. And this was true in EuroLeague, and it's true in his best moments in the G League and in the NBA. But too often does he just feel sped up, and it's like, I'm going full speed and, long strides, 1-2 step, and then I'm in the air and, I'm taking like a bad decel floater, or I don't know what to do. I was hoping we would see a little bit more of a, hey, I'm getting downhill, and then it's behind the back, or then it's a cross and a spin and 2 feet. Nolan was so bad like 2-3 months ago. Maybe it's just a confidence thing. Maybe it's just a lack of strength. But yeah, Ben's going through it. That being said, assist to turnover, like he's creating threes. You can see the court mapping, so that if you're going to hold on to anything, there is kind of the court awareness on offense,
Yeah. And the last thing I want to close the show out on is the tank landscape. We got to get into it because it is heating up in the NBA in a big way, over as we approach this last third of the season. And the Nets are in the thick of it. They've won 2 straight. They got a game against the Pacers coming up tomorrow. So what do we think of the Nets' recent strategy and the league-wide strategy as a whole? We'll get into that when we close out Locked On Nets after a quick break. Guys, tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert start to finish without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in. If a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. All right, coming back from the break, closing out today's Locked On Nets episode, got Lucas Kaplan here. And we got to talk about the tank, Lucas, because the Nets have won their last 2 games. And I think that I spoke about this on my episode after the Bulls game. I think their overall strategy has left something to be desired. Like, they didn't sit anybody out against Washington, who they were tied with in the lottery standings going into that game. Maybe they thought there's no way that we can beat this Wizards team that only has 8 available players, 4 of which are, 2-ways or 10-day contracts, I guess. But like, that was a curious decision. And then they don't sit Nick Claxton against the Bulls, a Bulls team that doesn't really even have a center, and Nick goes off for a career-high 28 points. So I didn't understand that. I know that you've got some thoughts about the in-game adjustments or the in-game rotations that Jordy went with during that Bulls loss. So just what do you think about the way the Nets have gone about this tank? Because despite, them winning their last 2 games, they still are very much in the thick of it, and how they proceed will be a big determinant and, where their ceiling is for their pick and their floor.
I thought Jordy was in on the tank. What happened? Dude, we were in Phoenix, and he late game subbing Ben Suraf in for the last offensive possession, and then Danny on defense. And I know I just talked about Danny switching, but he's not exactly Dennis Rodman out there. And against the Bulls, the bench unit that has always dominated really bad teams for the last 2-3 years with Day'Ron loses, they let up a 6-0, 7-0 run to the Bulls. And to start the fourth quarter, Jordy's like, unacceptable. We're putting the starters back in. I mean, he went all out to win that game. Maybe Jalen Wilson playing some fourth quarter minutes is kind of the counter to that, but it's surprising. And it would be one thing if they went full throttle against the Wizards, like, okay, this team is terrible, we're going to get a win, but then we can try to lose against the Bulls. But they did not do that. And you look at the standings, the Pacers won tonight, and nothing is decided, nothing is over, but I'm kind of getting that feeling in my stomach of it's going to be like last year, like, well, 5th or 6th or whatever, and let's just pray to the ping pong gods. Like, that's what I'm feeling like, but there's a lot of time for that to change, so I don't want to be too declarative about it.
Yeah, in fairness to them, they sat out Yegor and MPJ in that Bulls game, which, are major steps towards losing. But yeah, to your point, the in-game adjustments, like there were some pretty easy moves that they could have made to give them a really good chance of losing that game, and they didn't do it. And that's something that like maybe their philosophy is just like, we're not going to tank during a game, which I like totally understand because that can lead to some real frustrations with players and issues in the locker room. We are seeing other teams do it. Like the Jazz literally just like don't give a, flying F, and they just sit Lauri Markkanen and Jaren Jackson Jr. for the whole fourth quarter in their last two games. Now they're getting rest nights in their next game. So maybe the Nets are never going to get to that level. But yeah, in that Bulls game, like they, Day'Ron and Ben Surratt and some of these guys that were really struggling with the second unit, like Ben plays 13 minutes and Day'Ron plays 16. And meanwhile, Nick Claxton's out there playing 30 and putting up a career high. I didn't really understand that. I didn't get why Nick was playing in the first place. And I definitely don't get why he's playing 30 minutes in that game against a Bulls team that doesn't really have a starting level center. So that didn't really make sense to me. And it's a question for the rest of the season. I mean, like I had that feeling, that you had. I was a little bit worried. And then the injury report comes out today, and it's Michael Porter Jr.'s out for the Pacers game, which I fully expected. Noah Clowney's probable, and that's it. And I'm like, really? Like that's it against the Pacers team that's going to be on a back-to-back. But then we get Nick Claxton downgraded to questionable, and he's not going to play, I would assume. So that gave me a little hope. But yeah, the thing that I've been talking about is we're seeing teams, especially these teams with the mid-pick protections like the Wizards, the Jazz, now the Pacers, are going to go to extreme lengths to try to keep those picks and finish ahead of a team like the Nets. Get very shameless about it. The Nets have not been willing to go there up to this point. Are they going to? Maybe. But yeah, I think the jury's very much still out, and I, remain very skeptical about how willing they are to go to kind of those shameless lengths.
It's a funny contrast with the Bulls because the Bulls figured it out. You just don't roster anybody over 6'10". And the Nets are over here playing Nick and Day'Ron, and it's like, man, like this is night and day. And even the Wizards, that's one way to do it. The Jazz, hilarious. Tanking has never really bothered me that much. I texted you guys about it, but like the fact that Bam Adebayo can sit up there after a game and say, yeah, man, like we got to figure out a way to beat teams that are trying to lose. What else do you watch the NBA for? It's hilarious. I'm pro tanking. I'm pro the Nets doing it. I hope they get more shameless. I don't want to sit here and pretend like I have inside information about how shameless they're willing to get, but it would behoove them to play the odds. I will say, at least right now, they won in large part yesterday in the last two games because Nolan and Danny were good, which is so much more palatable from a fan's perspective than winning solely because of Nick, who I know had a career high, or just Terrence and Tyrese Martin. Like, if the rookies are playing well and it's helping to lead them to wins, that is a middle ground that, you can swallow and just go into the lottery and hope for the best. Better than just the veterans dragging you to wins, but I'm pro tank. I'm pro shamelessness. It's funny. If the NBA is going to invite a bunch of content creators instead of, actual journalists to the All-Star game, they should just go all in. Everyone loves tanking. It's hilarious. Everyone talks about it. Gets views.
Yeah, and
it's funny.
After the Pacers lost, the Nets are now 2 games behind the Pacers for second place in the lottery standings. And if they can get a win or they can get a loss, which is really a win, tomorrow, they'll be 1 game back of number 2. So, like, they have a real chance here. And I will say, like, if you look at the schedule, coming up after the All-Star break, it is not an easy schedule. Let me pull it up right here. But you look at the next 10 games or 11 games after the All-Star break, it's Cleveland, OKC, Atlanta, Dallas, San Antonio, Boston, Cleveland, Miami, Detroit. So that's a stretch where you can definitely stack some losses. So maybe the Nets can come away with a loss against the Pacers, and then they got that tough stretch coming up. We'll see. We'll have plenty more coverage of that here on Locked On Nets. But Lucas, appreciate you taking the time as always. We got one more game, then we got the All-Star break, so we'll have plenty to cover in the coming weeks. But yeah, man, appreciate you taking the time as always. That does it for today's episode of Locked On Nets. Hope you guys enjoyed the talk with Lucas. If you do not already, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Nets on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts, whether Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you enjoy my content, take a second right now, smash that like button, leave a comment, leave a 5-star review. Anything you can do to engage is much appreciated. And that's got one more game before the All-Star break against the Pacers on Wednesday. So I'll have coverage of all that and more when I'm back tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.